Ultimately, what is spirituality? Spirituality is loving God and loving others, but there's a lot of different ways to say that, right? People say that it's growing in their faith, that it's loving God and loving others, it's maturity, it's obedience, it's look and act like Jesus, it's being Christ-like. They're all synonyms for the same thing. But the journey, ultimately, after we've come to faith in Christ and after we've been baptized, the lifelong journey we're on is to love God and love others. But there's a difficulty with that. Loving God and loving others, because loving others makes sense. I know how to love others. If someone has a need, I meet it. I talk to people. I encourage them. I figure out ways I can care for them. I do kind things for them. If you love someone, you do what's nice to them. You spend time with them. Well, that makes sense, but how do you love God who doesn't have skin on? Does God have needs that you meet? No. Does God need encouragement? No. Do things go wrong in God's life and you step in and try to fix it? Well, no. So what is it? To say that someone loves God, I think that's hard to put our arms around a bit. So I want to try to help you think about what it really means to love God, and the Bible's really clear as to what it means. In fact, John, one of the closest followers of Jesus, told us what it is. In John 5:3, he says, "This is love for God." So in this one verse, he's going to clearly define what loving God is. Ready? This is love for God. It is to keep his commands. That's it. You want to know what love for God is? It's keeping his commands. Okay, this is really important. Make sure you catch this. Don't tell me that you love God if you're not willing to do what God tells you to do. You don't love God. Don't tell me that you love God, but you refuse to obey God. To love God is to obey God. The end of the verse says, and his commands are not burdensome. In other words, what that means is, and we talk about this a lot around here, God never simply gives commands in the New Testament to see if we'll jump through that hoop. God doesn't have commands that says, oh, that one will be hard. Let's see if they'll do it. Whenever God says don't, he's saying don't hurt yourself. Whenever God says do something, he's saying this is the best way to live. It has benefits not just for eternity, it actually has benefits right here and now. Sometimes it's hard for us because it's easier to do something else, but there's benefits here and now. They're not burdensome. Jesus said that his yoke is easy, his burden is light. So to love God is to obey him. This is from John, one of Jesus' closest friends, but Jesus said this himself in John 14:15. If you love me, keep my commandments. Bottom line. If you love me, keep my commandments. In verse 21, Jesus said it this way, whoever has my commands and keeps them is the one who loves me. There's just no confusing. He says it over and over, 5 different ways in John chapter 14. In verse 23, he says, Jesus replied, anyone who loves me will obey my teaching. If you love me, you will obey my teaching. My Father will love them and will come to them and make our home with them. And then he says the opposite is true also, verse 24. Anyone who does not love me will not obey my teaching. Don't say you love God if you're unwilling to obey God. Because if you say you love God, here's the sign whether or not that's true. You obey him. And Jesus didn't exclude himself. He follows that same rule in verse 31. I love the Father and do exactly what my Father has commanded me. That is what spirituality is. So, we say we're to love God and love others. Loving God, it seems to me, is a bit ambiguous, so let me say it this way, and this is what's written in your notes. Biblical spirituality is to obey God and love others. Bottom line, you want to know what it means to develop in your life spiritually? Obey God and love others. You want to know what it is to grow in your Christ-likeness? Obey God and love others.